It's a lunchtime debate, food for thought as well as food, we hope, and music. So we will endeavour not to burst into song too often. Thank you for coming to this. I'm Martin Fautley. I'm Professor of Education at Birmingham City University. And in one of those strange, how on earth did this happen moments, I have no idea how I got the gig of being chairman of the panel today. I must have not taken a step back quick enough. But anyway, so I am the chair. We have a number of topics we're going to try and discuss, and we are very happy as well to have it as a debate, so we'd like it to be as interactive as possible, although it would be nice if you could avoid throwing too many things at us, then we'd be very grateful. I'm going to ask my fellow panelists if they would introduce themselves briefly to you so you know who is who and what is going on roughly. Now, I've already told you who I am. I'll tell you quickly that my day job involves both researching and preparing PGCE teachers to teach in all subjects, including music, and my research interests lie in the area of assessment, creativity, composing, and music education generally in the classroom. And seated on my left is...
Hello, I'm Jane Humberstone. I started out in secondary music yonks ago and then became an advanced skills teacher, whereupon East Sussex Music Service took me on. So I've done a little bit of everything, instrumental teaching, first access, right down to year one. I now teach teachers and do a lot of support work with my very famous success rate of enabling a lot of people to decide that they no longer want to be music teachers.
Hi, I'm Anna Gower. I teach at Monk's Walk School in Hertfordshire, and I'm the head of community music there, and I teach there 3 days a week. It's a secondary school, 11 to 18. And I'm also the development director for an organisation called Musical Futures. And I'm very lucky in that both of my jobs feed into the other. So Musical Futures has some innovative ideas, and I take them into the classroom and try them out, and then take them back to Musical Futures, and we debate the goods and the bads and how to make them better for teachers.
I'm Gary Spruce. I taught music for about 15 and 16 years, secondary school music teacher in Birmingham, and then went on to the Open University, where I've led on their PGCE secondary music course for a good number of years. Being involved also in Key Stage 2 Wider Opportunities, CPD, and the writing that I've done has tended to be around teacher education and critical pedagogy, and more recently social justice and music education.
It's really interesting sitting here, I've reflected for the past 90 seconds, because of the cognitive dissonance that occurs as you're trying to construct intelligible thoughts with all sorts of sounds coming from behind you. So you must excuse us occasionally or certainly I appear to be off with the fairies, because that'll be part of it. But if we can kick off, the first question I have for our, what is it they say on Just a Minute, exciting, talented panel of personalities today, I'm asking what, in your opinion, is the single biggest issue facing classroom music teachers at the moment? And I'm going to ask Gary if he'll kick off on that one, please.
It's good to go first, because then nobody else will have my ideas, so not that they would want them. I think for me, I'd want to take quite a wide view and say that the big issue is the lack of or marginalisation of the music teacher voice in schools. It seems to, and the space within which that voice can be created. It seems to be that the discourse of music education for the last few years has tended to look upon music teachers as a problem to be solved, rather than a resource and an area of expertise within which can be developed. I was thinking last night, sitting in a pub with a pint of beer, and trying to put myself back in the position of a secondary music teacher, and actually working out that I probably couldn't cope, because I wouldn't know what, in the hubbub of messages that are coming at me, I wouldn't know how to sort them out. I wouldn't know what the expectations are of me. I wouldn't know how to develop my own philosophy of music teaching. I mean, if we think about it, at the moment we have, if you're a school music teacher, you have the expectations of your school, your particular ethos of your school, the demands of your school, the idea of what your school thinks a good lesson is. You've got the need to comply with Ofsted and the inconsistent messages that are coming from Ofsted about what good music teaching is, the way you teach important issues like notation and classical music and things like that. You have the national curriculum, which is putting forward a slightly different message. You have subliminal messages from the government, and we heard one this morning, for example, from Nick Gibb, which is entirely focused upon classical music, with the idea that now every primary child should know 100 pieces of classical music before they enter Key Stage 3. And you have, in a sense, an incoherence of the messages coming from the community. You have an informal music debate, which is great. You have things around that. You have a very strong advocacy message, which seems to be entirely focused upon the impact of music on literacy and numeracy. And you have all these diverse approaches, and it's actually, as a secondary music teacher with limited time, how do I sort this out? How do I develop my own voice? How do I create a community within which I construct my own philosophy of what music education is and teach something which I can believe? So I think the challenge is, rather a long way of answering that, is actually the lack of voice, the marginalisation of that voice, but actually creating the space in which that voice and voices can be developed.
Thank you. For the benefit of people coming in, we are currently discussing the question, what, in your opinion, is the single biggest issue facing classroom music teachers at the moment? And I'm going to ask Anna for her contribution next, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to build a little bit on what Gary said, because I agree wholeheartedly, and having just come out of the classroom yesterday, I could give you a massive long list, but the question says the single biggest issue. And I think, for me, kind of being able to watch it a step backwards, it's that we've got an extremely experienced and highly qualified workforce of teachers that are very slowly being robbed of the confidence and the skills to be able to deliver music teaching in a way that they know is best for their students. And the reason for that happening is that we are quite different. What we do in our classrooms is messy. It doesn't always look nice. It sounds horrendous most of the time, to be honest, but within that is a huge amount of benefit and learning for those children, and we know them best. We know, as the professionals, what it is to be a good music teacher and a good music educator, and yet what we're fighting against all the time are the preconceptions of, I suppose, on the one hand, what people think music should look and sound like in a classroom, and there's a huge diverse range of options you can choose from. Should it look like the music education we had ourselves as teachers? Should it look like the music education that our senior leaders who observe our lessons had? And if what they see in our classrooms doesn't quite look the same as what they've experienced themselves, at what point do you have those discussions with them about, well, you know, this is music in the 21st century, and where are our students? And surely the engagement of them with what we're offering them in class and the benefits that brings should be a discussion that's open to be had. We've got the pressures that schools are under to be consistent and to conform to the expectations and this fear of Ofsted, and Ofsted want to see something that they may not see in a music classroom, and all the debates that are happening around what that actually is and what that could and should look like are really difficult for a music teacher to I suppose, feel confident enough to stand up and really challenge within their schools themselves. So I think, for me, it's this issue of the confidence of us as professionals in really feeling that we can do the job that we know we're qualified to do and that we do well, and I think we should be given the freedom and flexibility and respect within schools and within the wider community for what we do and for the knowledge and experience that we bring to our job.
Thank you. Jane?
I find that really interesting, what you were saying about teachers creating their own voice, developing their own voice. I don't think they've got the opportunity to, because a lot of what they're being asked to do in the classroom nowadays is about things that aren't musical and that don't conform to any kind of creativity or musical process, and that's the constant proving of themselves through data. And for me, that's the biggest issue is, and now assessing without levels has seemed to cause even more problems for people. So I'm going to be brief and leave it at that.
And as it's me next, then I'm sure you'd all expect to say that assessment is the issue that I think is the biggest one for classroom music teachers at the moment, and you won't be disappointed, because I do think assessment is the biggest issue for classroom music teachers at the moment. And my inbox is regularly full but interesting, both of stories of teachers of terrible experiences they've had, but also hopeful stories about what they can do. And the hopeful stories at the moment relate to the way that levels are no longer compulsory. Whenever I go and talk to classroom teachers at the moment, and I currently seem to be engaged on a sort of world tour of England, if that's not a contrary whatever, I ask the teachers, how many of you are still required by your schools to use levels? Notice the phrase required, not want to, but required. And of the visits that I've made so far, all over the place, I would say that roughly 80% of the secondary teachers I talk to, secondary teachers, are still required to use levels. And sometimes they've been cunningly disguised, so that one school told me, no, we don't use levels anymore. What do you have? We have these rainbow colours. But they cunningly, the colours of the rainbow cunningly match up to the levels. So I don't know where they got the 8th one and exceptional performance in, but anyway, they've matched it. So you are now a blue C or something. Well, that's not that much more helpful than it was before. So assessment is that. But it's the things that the other people on the panel have said that worries me in a way just as much, which is assessment related, which is when you have to prove that pupils have made progression, but they are only allowed to progress up one sub-level at a time, and it cannot be a regression, so they cannot go down a level or a sub-level or a green, blue, pink elephant, whatever that school is using, from what it was last time. And I've called this unilinear progression. And I worry that teachers, music teachers, are having to prove some bizarre form of straight line progression, which doesn't actually tell them anything about what the kids have done, and doesn't really tell the schools anything either. Those are my thoughts. Somewhere there's somebody with a microphone who is going to... There you go. So, those are our thoughts on what is the biggest single issue facing classroom music teachers at the moment. And it's a debate. We're happy to take contributions from the floor. If you'd like to preface what you're asking or saying, should anybody wish to contribute, that is, by telling us who you are and who you represent or anything of that nature, please do. So, open to the floor for issues, the biggest single issues facing classroom music teachers at the moment. Oh, good, there are no issues. Oh. Because I wear varifocals, I'm now proving I can neither hear nor see in this particular venue.
Good afternoon. My name is Jahan Hunter. I teach at the Mountbatten School in Romsey, just north of Southampton. I just want to reiterate the frustration which I'm having within the classroom, and that I'm confined by using this idea that progress has to be linear, and trying to explain to my senior leadership team that it can only go forward and can only go up, whereas I think that, you know, as teachers we've been taught that it's more of a spiral effect and you're constantly building upon previous knowledge that you've done. Are there any other solutions that we can assess within the classroom which will be successful to help the progression of children to actually develop musically as opposed to as a number or as a letter? Are there any solutions that we know within this room?
I think the thing, I'll answer that one before passing it to the panel, or start to answer it. I think one of the things is to disentangle assessment of attainment from assessment of progression. And I think we need to assess attainment in a way that is realistic compared to what the kids are actually doing, but then we need to disentangle assessment of progression so that we're not having to form a straight line graph. So an example is, I've been to a school where there is a project on songwriting. The kids all do really well on their project on songwriting, and the next project just happened to be on the Viennese waltz. But because of the unilinear nature of progress, the kids couldn't score lower on their Viennese waltz project than they could in their songwriting project. So that's not a realistic attainment assessment because the progression is getting in the way. The downside of this is, and sadly I've seen this in some schools, that they are then placing all of what we might loosely call their least interesting units at the start of year 7 because those are the ones the kids are going to score worse on. So I can think of nothing worse than going up to secondary school. Do you remember Janet Mills and No Keyboards Till Christmas? Well, you go up to secondary school and get all the rubbish units in the first year because these are the ones you're going to do most badly at.
I suppose the other danger of the what you call it, unilinear? Yeah. Unilinear is that it actually narrows down the way in which you define what musical progression is to a particular set of values, and those values are almost inevitably going to be wrapped around the kind of elements Western art music thing. Because if you do go into something else where where the opportunity to show learning and musical attainment is in something else where you can't make progress, then you simply don't do it because you can't make progress. So another consequence of this is to narrow the musical experience of the children.
I had a brilliant experience with my line manager last year. Well, brilliant is probably not the right word, it's just interesting and quite funny because he came and did a lesson observation. In my school, they're really proud of the fact that they look for progress in 4 different areas. They look in data, they look in the lesson itself, they ask the children, and they look within their written work and in their books. And they're really understanding that in music we don't have written work and books, and they're very open to the idea that I'll provide recordings for them and they can find everything they need to find. And that's great, we've had those conversations and it's understood. And one of the things he asked in the lesson that he was observing to the students was, what do you think you're making progress? And the reply he got back from them was, well, yeah, our music's getting better, isn't it? And he said to me as part of the feedback, and it was a great lesson, and I was very happy with the outcome, he said, I think what you need to do is you need to coach the students, Anna. You need to say to them, when you're asked, are you making progress? Although they all said they were making progress, I'm not quite sure they really understood what they were saying. So do you think you could coach them through this a little bit, give them some statements that maybe they could say? And I said, no, actually, I don't think so. If they say they're making progress, they probably are. And I had that conversation with him, followed by a conversation with the deputy head, who immediately said to me, that's absolutely ridiculous. The conversations with the students and the music in the lessons should be sufficient for progress to be demonstrated. And so I'm really fortunate that having those conversations with my senior leadership team means that between us, we've laughed at each other and had the fights and the arguments, but constantly getting them in the classroom to watch the lessons and for me to point out what musical progress looks like and asking those students, are you making progress? Yes, we are. It's come to a situation that I'm much happier with, but I realise that not everyone is that fortunate. And I think the main issue is, who knows what progress looks like in music? Anyway, particularly if you're not really a musician and you're only in the classroom for maybe 30 minutes, it's very difficult to find it. And I think as the teacher in the classroom, we've got to help point them in the right direction. And whether that's by collecting recordings or collecting little bits of evidence from the students in a way that doesn't impinge on what we're trying to do, I think we've got a responsibility to try and do everything we can to open those conversations.
Okay, is our roving mic around still? So I think there was another hand I saw. Oh, it's right in front of me. I ought to better see that, really. Varifocals work in straight lines.
My name's Chris Wilkinson and I'm a classroom teacher at Cardinal Langley School in Manchester. Another issue that I have is with the marking policy of books. We've been told that only evidence is only through their books, and we are having to find ways, we're having to actually find ways in the classroom, which is taking up half of the time in the classroom, just to write things in the books. Just to produce as evidence. You can't practice on any instruments, and it's just focused on writing rather than actually developing any practical skills. Is there any ways you could suggest?
I think that going back to what Abigail says, it's you proving that you can do it in a different way. They say one way, but Abby's mentioned all the other ways that you can evidence. For me, it's about that leadership team having trust in teachers, which they don't seem to have anymore. But you know, and you proving that you know your children and that you have evidence somewhere that you could say that Johnny's doing that, and that they are kind of coached to say, so that when you do speak to them, and Ofsted triangulate evidence, that's what they do. So if they speak to a child, the child might say, yeah, I know I'm making progress because I used the blue note this week and I wasn't using it last week. Yeah.
There is a document which might be helpful, produced by Ofsted, called something like Guidance for Head Teachers When Observing Music Lessons. It's something along those lines. Now, that's not absolutely linked to that, but it actually gives a pretty reasonable, idea of what music teachers should be doing, and therefore what you should be, the evidence that should be there for you to assess upon. So that might actually be a starting point, just putting that in your senior leadership's hands to look at. You may already have done that and got nowhere.
One of the issues is that because you've got an appraisal to meet, and if you don't meet those deadlines, then you can't move up in the pay progression. It's basically used as a deterrent so that you have to conform to whatever they say.
There's also an Ofsted document whose name temporarily escapes me that says something about what there are two. There's one that says what they're not looking for, and exactly what you're describing is what they are not looking for. And there's another one which describes music teaching is inadequate when, And so what you're describing also fits that. So I'd have a look through some of the Ofsted publications themselves and say, hold on, SLT, you're asking me to do something which Ofsted themselves say is inadequate. Are you happy with that? And I put it back to them.
It is called professional development materials. If you just put into the Ofsted website music professional development materials, you've got a document there that you can share with your senior leaders about. It's a conversation document really about music.
Okay, I'm going to move on to our next question, which is if you had a magic wand and it was a one-time use magic wand, you can wave it once only, what would be the thing that you would do in order to most benefit classroom music? Should we start with Jane this time?
I've been pondering this for a while actually, and I've always said you can make it free. I know Nick Gibb this morning said that if they were to fund every single child learning a musical instrument, it would be prohibitive. Well, that's not the way it would be. If they made instrumental lessons free, it's a tiny proportion of a government budget for those who want to take up instrumental lessons. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'm talking music service now, and the classroom teachers won't like that. But how much would that benefit your whole department if every child had the chance to continue what they'd started for maybe 1 year in primary school, if it was still free? That's the biggest burden for us as a music service, is that we can't get the children to continue all these wonderful programs that we start because they have to start paying, and the price is becoming prohibitive. And I think the more musicians you have in a classroom, the more it influences the whole culture of the school. And we all know that the more musicians in a school, the better that it does.
I think I would like music in schools to be music, and therefore the magic wand to remove all the barriers that says that music has to look or sound like every other lesson. I'm kind of coming back to a bit of a theme here. Every other lesson in the school, and kind of accept that it's different and let me do my job to bring music to the kids that really benefit from it. And there are so many aspects. Yeah, there are so many aspects of this, but music is music, and it isn't maths, and it isn't English, and it isn't history. It is completely different, and I just love for it to be valued for what it is, rather than kind of forced into a corner or into the kind of shape that's made by other subjects that it really isn't. That wasn't a very good answer, but yeah.
The opportunity for continuing professional development, but of a particular type, I think. When I began teaching, we used to have things called consortium meetings back in the days of local authorities, when teachers from a wide, across the area would come together and talk about music education, and we would have guests, expert guests that would come in and talk and debate with us about those kinds of things. So it would be actually a CPD which doesn't look upon music teachers as a problem that needs to be solved, where somebody needs to come in with a workshop to solve a particular problem or give somebody a resource, but actually CPD which empowers music teachers to teach music.
Mine is actually very similar to Gary. I think the clue is in the title. I work in Birmingham, and I've just done some work for Birmingham looking at the average department size. And if you get a department of 2.4, which seems to be in Birmingham the modal average, that's what it is. Which means that any one person in music only has 1.4 other professionals to talk to about classroom music. So mine would be, the magic wand would be classroom teachers get out more and talk to each other. And I think that would be a real serious thing. When I have been asked to go and talk to networking meetings of music teachers, I've always said, I really think, I'm happy to do it, but is there time for the guys to talk to each other? And is there a coffee break? Because that, apart from me and needing coffee, that's really significant. Just music teachers talking to each other so they're not talking to the same 1.4 people all the time, I think makes a real serious difference to the way we think about things. I'm also saddened to say that I do know of some schools who are very protective of their music teachers. I've actually got it in writing from a survey I did. One head said, yes, we've got a very good music teacher. I'm paraphrasing. I don't really want to let them out because they're so good. Why should other schools benefit from talking to them? And you just think, oh, crikey. And so we're trying to establish networking, and a head teacher is saying, our music teacher is too good to be let out. And it's those sorts of things that I find profoundly sad. So in total agreement. And it's roving mic time. Any questions on magic wands and waving things? Or statements, or anything?
Hi, I'm Katie Hasler, Head of Music at Woodford County High School. I guess I'm building on what we've already said about like teachers having a chance to network and CPD. And it was mentioned in one of the talks this morning. The elephant in the room is all the music teachers who aren't here today and who aren't here tomorrow because their senior leadership team won't let them out of school, perhaps because they're too good or more likely just because their CPD isn't being valued enough. And I think there's a real issue there. I think I'm also a fellow on the Teaching Music London programme, and there's a real issue with lots of fantastic events that are going on through that. And again, even people who are signed up to the programme are not being released from teaching to go and do these things that will just hugely benefit their own, training and their own professional development. And I think perhaps that is the same in maths and science, but I feel like music teachers definitely seem to, our CPD doesn't seem to be valued as highly as it should be, and I think that's a problem.
Can I just jump in on that as well? I think there's definitely a culture of SLT not allowing people out of schools. It is expensive and the cover costs are huge and schools have budgetary issues, and we completely understand that. But is the message out there that things like today are available to teachers? Are we actively looking for CPD opportunities for ourselves or sharing amongst each other? Because I'm not entirely sure that all the music teachers in this country know that this event is happening. And I think we've got real issues with reaching the music teachers who are busy and in their classrooms on their own, who don't have those networking opportunities, to say, look, this is out there. And I think we would feel better supported, and we may be able to actually find some answers. What's coming up today, there are loads of issues facing classroom music teachers, but that magic wand that says, here are the answers to these issues, I don't think we're quite there yet. But if we were able to be more of a community and more of a workforce, and we were drawn together more, and communication was better and easier, and there was some kind of way that we could reach all these people that are not being reached. So I think there's another side to that. I think that it's being proactive in seeking out the CPD at the same time as then going to the school and saying, no, I would like to go, and also putting a really good case forward. I would like to go because I will get this, this and this from it, and that will impact on the school and on the department in X, Y and Z ways, and it will be for benefit to everybody.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Brewer. I'm Head of Creative Arts, in particular Teach Music. If I had a magic wand, I would get rid of these awful levels which are imposed on pupils, which are based on maths and English, and really impose such a barrier for the children because it's impossible for them to reach the levels. They don't come to us with the same level of music as they do in maths and English, and they're always playing catch up. And parents don't understand the school, even though I've got my SLT quite well trained, they will not give that up. They have for MFL. MFL are given lower levels because they say they haven't done that before they come to secondary, but they just don't get that the music levels are unattainable and totally demoralising for pupils. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that as to how I can win the argument with my SLT. Thank you.
I've had this conversation with an awful lot of people, and I don't know if it makes you feel any better, but one of the secondary schools I've been to, one primary school sent everybody to this secondary school already at level 7 as they left the primary school. And the secondary school teacher, in a sort of moment of total panic, said, but they don't even know which way up the older Glockenspiel be to, let alone be level 7. And it's sadly, this is an issue. There is an NAHT report, 2014, whose title I've forgotten, that has all sorts of interesting phrases in it. And one of them is about, it's basically saying that it's because of performativity, that primary schools are trying to do the best they can and gaming their system. But the knock-on effect on secondary is exactly that it does need to be addressed. The downside of this means that you've then got to baseline them in some way that is realistic and that the SLT understand. But I think it's really important that they get that it's not based on that. There's also somewhere a Fisher Family Trust statement, which is quite helpful, that says our prediction, don't quote me verbatim, our predictions are least accurate in subjects where some degree of aptitude is required, e.g. music. And so if Fisher Family Trust are saying that, that's quite another nice, useful one to wave under the noses of SLTs.
Hi, Danielle Hughes, Leader of Performance, secondary school music teacher. Just wanted to say, if I had a magic wand, I would have an SLT representative who's flying the flag for the arts. I think you need somebody around that table who is there and has the same level of passion to be able to deliver the message in your absence because you're not that high up. As well, I would like to say just a personal thanks to the research and help from Anna and Martin, because you do help my battle on a daily basis, because you fly the flag for me. I go into school and everybody's well aware of all the research that you do that helps us tremendously. So thank you.
It's very kind of you to say it. One of the things I'll say is I often get dragged in to see senior leadership teams, and they say to me the disparaging comment, "But you're not Ofsted, you don't know." And which I passed on to Robin Hamilton, who I don't think is in the room at the moment, and I had this conversation with him, and he said, "Worry not, I get told I'm only music, I don't know." So it's not just me, it's also Ofsted themselves. Should we move on to our next one? Okay, so our third topic for discussion. Do you think there are any issues with the teaching and learning of composing in schools, particularly at examination level? So issues with the teaching and learning of composing in schools, particularly at examination level. Anna, do you want to kick off on this one?
Yes, there are.
Oh, okay.
There's so many things caught up in this, really. First of all, speaking personally, I would never have thought I was a composer. And therefore, to try and teach composing was something that I had to work really hard at, and to step back and think, well, hang on a minute, I've got to learn this as well. Because my composing experience had been at GCSE and A-level music, of going on Sibelius and being told to write a piece of music, which I think is the most unmusical way of composing anything ever. But at the same time, my classroom music experience didn't really have much helpful practical music in it. So I feel that when we're asking students to compose, first of all, we've got to start by providing them with the tools that they need to be able to do that. So if you're going to put together a piece of music, you need to understand how music is constructed, you need to have used it in a variety of different ways. And so in my Key Stage 3, it's all about workshopping and modelling the process with them while they're at those early stages, and then getting them to replicate that in small groups, and then to replicate that again individually, so that they're learning the processes through being modelled. And I suddenly realised by doing this approach that actually I am a composer. I just didn't realise, because all the time when I'm workshopping with these students, you're taking the ideas and you're moulding them and layering them and creating a piece of music together with a group of students. And when I realised that composing is actually really easy. And all you need is the confidence to try out the ideas and to start it. And there's a whole other issue there as well. Like, kids like music to sound good straight away. They don't like it that much if they play something and it doesn't really work. And there's quite a lot of disengagement at that point. Oh, it doesn't sound like Ed Sheeran wrote this song, I'm not going to write it anymore. So we have work to do with kind of empowering confidence for trying out the ideas in the first place. And then this idea of a toolkit, of modelling it all the way through Key Stage 3, and ideally much younger in primary schools as well. And really nurturing the natural creativity that I believe everyone does have. And if you've got a way of them bringing it to you in the classroom and you then making something of it, the confidence and the creativity that comes from that is absolutely amazing and can really go places.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, briefly, I think from an examination point of view, and with the new GCSE content, it just seems to me to privilege one particular way of composing, which is the production of a score, and therefore disadvantages a whole load of young people who compose in different ways. If I can recommend anybody who wants to do some reading, there's a blog by, he may even be here, a guy called Jason Kubilius, who teaches in London School, and he has a blog, and he's written that's called something Assessment, Music and Whiteness. And he looks at the way in which the content for GCSE and A-level disadvantages young people from different cultures and different ethnic groups. And it's really eloquent and it's inspiring and it's far better than I could say. So if you want to read it, it's Kubilius, Kubilius, Google that. And his latest blog, I think it's fascinating and inspiring on this.
Hi, I went away with the fairies then, could you tell? It was all sort of going off out there. For me, I'd like to be able to give you a reflective statement about the composers in your GCSE classroom and who the successful ones were and why were they successful, and was it to do with anything that you did in Key Stage 3, or was it to do with something that they do in their bedroom with their guitar because they like it. And I think too often I see when I walk, I'm disheartened when I go into a secondary classroom and I see children aimlessly composing with no kind of focus, but the teacher not really able to guide them. So it's back to everything Anna says. If we could all have teachers like Anna in our classrooms, we need to get out more.
I think. Go on, Gary. You go.
In the spirit of debate,
Yes.
it's a very dangerous thing to say that children are composing without focus, because it's very difficult to know exactly what's going on in their minds at any given time. And sometimes I feel there are pressures for teachers to perhaps overstructure composing and overlead composing in a particular way. And actually, if you can give children the space in order to do things, amazing things actually do emerge. That's not negating what you've said, but it's about being very careful about which some focus.
It's having those skills to enable that kind of creativity, and what I'm talking about is kids sitting on a work surface on their phone.
That's just off task. Yeah.
Rather than having the skills to be able to harness creativity. Like your report, Listen, Compose, Perform, was it? Listen, Imagine, Compose, which has been quite influential on quite a few teachers I've worked with. Read that.
Yeah, thanks. Read the Listen, Imagine, Compose report. The thing I was going to say is that I talk to a lot of teachers, and I currently have a lady doing a PhD with me looking at examination composing. And she's going around interviewing teachers on this. And one of the things that she's finding is that teachers haven't, I was going to say no confidence, but I use that in the statistical sense rather than in the sociological sense. No confidence in the grades that their kids are going to get for composing from examination boards. And so she's met people who they think that their kids have done an extraordinarily good composition for A-level that scored very lowly. And one of the things that she's done is in Birmingham Conservatoire is part of the university I work for. She's been to talk to professors of composing there who've said to her, basically, we disregard what they got for A-level. We want to see what they've done and what they can talk about. And I think it's a very sad state when we've got to the position that a professor of composing says, don't really care what the grade is because I don't trust it. I want to talk to the candidate and find out what they're doing. So I think there are serious issues with the ways in which composing is assessed. Now, it may well be that we simply, like Gary said, we need more CPD to find out what the exam board is looking for. We need to find out the ways in which these things are being marked. But when a number of teachers tell me that they are concerned about this, then all I can do is be the conduit for their concern and share that with you. And as I say, the PhD student I have at the moment is finding this big style, and I am yet waiting for her to come back to me and say, hey, guess what? I've interviewed a teacher who was really happy with the composing grades for their kids, because so far it ain't happened. Okay, and it's roving mic time, and Judith is going to ask a question. There you go. I knew that before it happened.
Hello, I'm Judith Robinson. I'm from Sound and Music. We're the organisation that's been working with Martin and Birmingham Contemporary Music Group to develop Listen, Imagine, Compose. So I was really interested to hear what Anna said about her journey of discovery. And Listen, Imagine, Compose is aiming to facilitate that change, I think, in teachers. We're piloting CPD at the moment, and it will be available more widely. So if you want more information, I'm here, and come and talk to me, please. And that's really what I wanted to say.
And I'll do the plug. If you look at their website, which is soundandmusic.org, then you will find a lot of information about the work that they are currently doing. So happy to do a plug for that. Okay, roving mic time. I can see something moving, which is either somebody running out the back door or a hand waving.
Thank you very much. I'm Simon Rushby. I'm Head of Music at Reigate Grammar School in Surrey. I wanted just to pick up on your point, actually, about assessment of composing and what the university person said. We've got an opportunity at the moment, which is that the exam boards are consulting on the new syllabuses for music, particularly at A-level, and we've got an opportunity to tell them that the best way to assess composition is teacher assessment. And not external examiner assessment, which is a bit of a lottery, to be honest. You know, you never know quite when you send your compositions off what marks they're going to get, and you rarely agree with them when they come back. Teacher assessment is certainly not the be-all and end-all or the golden answer, I don't think, because, of course, that's moderated as well. But we as teachers know best how our students are progressing and how to assess them in composition and anything that's creative. And we need to work together with the exam boards, I think, to develop a set of criteria that rewards creativity and allows them to get what they deserve when they make terrific progress as composers.
Gary, do you want to say anything about exam things?
No, I don't think that's what I want to.
I think between the privacy of these four walls and whilst nobody is listening, I do hope that consultations pay attention to what people tell them. Shall I stop talking at that point? Perhaps it would be safest so to do.
Hi, I'm Joe Shaw. Trained as a teacher a few years ago, but I now work doing music outreach for Cambridge University. I was just reflecting on Anna's comment about having confidence in your own ideas, because that was very much my struggle not being a composer. And some of the work I did through my university and PGCE was looking at, I think, the way that over-assessment and the wrong kind of assessment has contributed to students just not wanting to give of themselves and just are not able to try, and they don't want to try because of the fear of failing and losing face, basically. And I think there is a real issue there in terms of how we set up the environment, and assessment is a very big part of the environment that we're in as to whether people will actually give of themselves and their musical ideas. I don't think that's a question, but...
Okay, shall we... One more? Is there another one? See, told you I can't see.
Hello, I'm Katina Williams, and I feel a bit lonely because I'm a primary school teacher and I do primary music. But I'm just wondering if some of these things about confidence and stuff maybe come from a primary base. Obviously, being a primary teacher, I think that's the case. But that at a primary level, I'm quite unusual because I do teach music in a school for 2 days a week, but I can't get another music teaching job in a primary school. So I'm a classroom-based normal teacher, if you want to put that in inverted commas, the other time. And I just wonder if encouraging some specialist music teachers in primary school will help with these things, because trying to encourage children to compose with all instruments and being confident in what they're doing and saying, hey, we can create a piece of winter music with our instruments, and getting them used to doing that at a primary level might then help with them trying out stuff later on. But if a lot of primary schools don't have teachers that have that confidence, and they have a singing assembly and something else, and that's their primary music, then you're not building any confidence of trying out stuff to then move into these exam levels later on.
That's a really interesting point, because I think the word patchy was used earlier to describe some of the provision that goes on across the country. Certainly as a secondary teacher, I've got 25 feeder primary schools, and I know that all of the students that come to me have been through really different experiences. Lots of it really good, but some is very singing based. Other aspects of it have been led by specialists, and others have had absolutely nothing at all. And I think that what underpins all of this is the idea of confidence. And part of my job at Musical Futures in the past few months has been looking exactly at that, about how we can help the teachers in primary schools who may not consider themselves to be musical or musicians or at all specialists. And there's this big thing, isn't there? To teach music, you have to be a specialist. And that idea of what a specialist looks like is sometimes really quite, a concert pianist is a specialist. And a lot of people teaching in schools probably wouldn't relate to that, and certainly wouldn't consider themselves to be on that level of specialism. So if we're able to help people feel more confident themselves as musicians or able to be musical, then working with the children at whatever level that they're able to, it then becomes much more possible. So we're really interested in looking at how you develop that confidence with teachers across the board, really. And certainly even as a secondary specialist, I was definitely not confident doing some of the workshopping stuff that I now absolutely love doing. And it was a massive journey for me. I could read music, but take away the dots and I was absolutely floundering, and I was really not very musical. So I had to put myself on a journey as a musician and as a teacher myself to get to the way that I deliver music now. And I think that we've all got work to do in terms of working out where our areas of confidence and expertise lie. And I think certainly in primary there's a lot of work to be done, and that can be done really positively in empowering the teachers who can then empower the children who then come through to the secondary and challenge some of the things we're talking about now.
Can I just say that I've seen some outstanding composition work with general music teachers, but it just goes back to this confidence issue. I've seen absolutely amazingly in-depth composing work with people stealing all the utensils from the kitchen, and all they needed was a spark of confidence. So I'm not a great believer in the music specialist, because I've also seen some very restrictive things done by music specialists, and it's back down to initial teacher training again, and imbuing everyone with the confidence.
I've got the microphone. I was just going to say that you're not on your own as a primary teacher. I'm not exactly a classroom teacher, but I do work in primary most of my time as a PERI teacher, and I just wanted to blow the trumpet for the first access systems, because I do, yes. Just thinking about, I have a PGCE as well, so I know all the challenges of composition and that fear of trying out ideas and thinking that the first idea you come up with has to be the right one and has to be the composition, and it's not like that. And something that I try to do from day one of my recorder and 5 groups is improvisation, because I think that's the basis of all composition. You have to try out ideas. And yeah, I just wanted to blow the trumpet for the first access programs out there that are, every week going into primary schools, trying to instill those things that hopefully it will feed forward to your secondary level students, hopefully.
I would argue that there's not a lot of composing goes on in the majority of first access, and I'd like to be proved wrong.
Yeah, just I think if you look at like any of the major music festivals this year on television, the ratio boys to girls and men to women is about 60-1 of females taking part in music ensembles. Do you think we're letting the girls down in music classes?
I didn't quite get all the questions.
If you look at any major music festivals or even local music festivals, I'm involved one in Warrington in Cheshire, and we looked at the people who are on the stage, and the ratio males to females is about 60-1.
60 females.
60 men to 1 girl. So I checked it out with Glastonbury. It was on television that year, and it was exactly the same. So I'm just wondering, are we doing enough for young women to, just to develop that lifelong love of music and a need to be involved in music ensembles and take part at that kind of level?
I think this is slightly ducky the question, but I think there's a whole range of issues there about the kinds of music boys, girls, women, men feel they can become involved in. I mean, Lucy Green's done a whole lot of work on this, but I think it is trying, certainly within the classroom, to remove those kinds of barriers which children perceive to exist between what boys can do and what girls can do, but also assumptions that teachers make about the way in which boys act musically and the ways in which girls act musically and what they do well and what they don't do well. So that's a fairly sort of superficial answer, but there's a hell of a lot of work around that and a lot of issues around culture and class and gender, I think, around that.
You gonna say something?
Hi, I'm Annie Sheen from South Bank Centre. Just to pick up on the gentleman in the front row's point, I don't know whether you know, but the King's College University just brought a very interesting and important report about the gender inequality that happens, particularly focusing in classical music industry. And it is a huge problem in terms of gender equality, even in our orchestras. And an interesting fact that I was reading in the report, that actually in our youth orchestras, they comprise of 60% girls, and our youth orchestra is 60% girls and 40% boys. But actually, when you're looking at our professional orchestras and the intake into conservatoires and universities, it's the other way around. And I just wondered whether the panel had any insights into what is happening and why those figures are ringing true in 2015.
Gender inequalities in youth orchestras and then into conservatories.
So I can only really talk from a school experience, and I think we're talking about issues of inclusion. And So from a school perspective, and apologies, this probably won't answer the question because it's a little bit out of my area of expertise, but it's a really interesting point. And I think the Ofsted report, Wider Still and Wider, actually identified the opposite, that there were more girls engaging in music in schools. I might be wrong. I think I was looking at that the other day, than there were boys. But I think ultimately our goal within school music needs that it's fully inclusive and that there's something in there for everybody, regardless of what gender you are or what your musical interests are as well. So I think if we're able to perhaps address that, then the knock-on effect into the real world might be slightly
wonder
different.
if I understood what you said, if you say there's a shift from kind of school-age children in orchestras from predominant or 60% female to 40% male, and then it shifts. Is that what you were saying? Then I think there's a kind of conservatoire training issue at post schools and the way in which the role is projected and all the kinds of tuition or whatever relationships that are built up there. I suspect that the problem is beyond the school age, if that's where the shift is taking place.
I think we're about to be out of time, so I'd like to thank Gary, Anna and Jane, and thank you for coming, and thank everybody both at the front, the middle and the back for enduring the considerable cognitive challenge involved in undertaking a debate under these circumstances, and well done for doing so, and now I think a well-earned caffeine input is required. Thank you, everyone.